The private dining room at the Somerset Club glittered under crystal chandeliers. 30 investors in black tuxedos. Marcus Reeve, the chief executive, lifted his glass and pointed at the man in the cheap gray suit and the worn-down shoes. "I wasn't aware we'd started inviting delivery drivers to this table." The room laughed. Daniel Hale did not react. He set his napkin down, slowly. The carved doors opened. Chairman Harold Whitmore, 74, walked in. He passed the open chair beside Marcus without looking at it. He pulled out the chair on his own right hand. "Daniel, I saved this seat for you." That morning, at 6 o'clock, the sky over Newton, Massachusetts, had still been the color of slate. In a small 2-story wooden house at the end of a quiet street, Daniel Hale was stirring oatmeal on the stove. Noah, 8 years old, sat at the kitchen table in a Navy school sweater, his hair still messy from sleep. He held out his neck without being asked. Daniel set down the wooden spoon, walked over, and tied the boy's small tie with hands that had done it 1,000 times. "Will you be home late tonight, Dad?" Daniel smiled, brushing the hair back from his son's forehead. "There's an important dinner. I'll be home before you fall asleep. You promise?" "He promise." The boy nodded the way he always did, as if a promise were a real and weighty thing. In the old Ford F-150, the heater rattled and the windows fogged. A small photograph of Sarah was tucked into the corner of the rearview mirror, the edges curled from 5 years of sun and weather. Daniel touched it with 2 fingers. He said nothing. Noah sat in the passenger seat, sketchbook on his knee, drawing a whale moving through long, curling waves. Daniel dropped his son at school. He waited at the curb until Noah disappeared through the doors. The office in Cambridge was small. 2 monitors, a standing desk he never used, stacks of logistics files arranged in neat columns along the wall. He worked alone. For the last 3 weeks he had been studying the books of Northbridge Logistics, a small carrier out of Worcester, at the request of Claire Donovan, Director of Capital Markets at Whitmore Capital Holdings. His phone rang at 10. Her voice was clean, professional. "Tonight is important, Mr. Hale. Marcus will be presenting the Northbridge acquisition. I want you in the room. You understand that company better than anyone else who will be there." There was a long pause on his end. "I'll be there. Thank you." He stood at the closet door at 5 o'clock with the suit bag in his hand. The gray wool suit was 8 years old. It was the suit Sarah had picked out for him at a tailor in the South End, the only one he owned. He put it on. His phone buzzed once more. The voice on the line was older, careful, familiar. "Mr. Hale, the chairman asked whether you would be coming. I answered for you. I said yes. I hope you don't mind." Daniel closed his eyes. He nodded once into the phone before he answered. "No, Eleanor, I don't mind." He drove into Beacon Hill at 7. The valet at the Somerset Club took the keys to the old F-150 between a row of Bentleys and a Mercedes Maybach. The man glanced at the truck. He glanced at Daniel. He glanced at the truck again. He almost spoke. He did not. Daniel walked up the stone steps without slowing. He stopped at the top briefly and looked back once at the truck. Sarah had ridden in that truck on the way home from the hospital after her last appointment. He had driven the long way that day, through the orchards in Concord. She had wanted to see the apples on the trees. He turned and walked through the glass doors. Inside, the maitre d' looked at his suit and hesitated. Daniel offered the man his name. The man checked the list twice. Then he led him, without further comment, the long way around the room, between the velvet drapes, past the bar. Across the room, Claire Donovan, seated at the table, watched him being walked in. She did not yet know who he was. She knew only that he carried himself like a man who had not been a guest in a room like this in a long time, and who had once been entirely at home in rooms like this, which were not, in her experience, the same kind of man. When the chairman sat down beside him, Daniel did not move. He folded his hands in his lap. Marcus, recovering quickly, attempted a smile and turned to the rest of the table. "Harold, are you sure you haven't got the wrong table?" A few polite chuckles. Quieter than before, the chairman did not laugh. He set his cane against the chair, turned his shoulders toward Daniel, and spoke gently, the way an old man speaks to a son. "How is Noah, by the way? Your boy?" The table went silent. Forks paused. A waiter froze mid-pour. No one at this table had known the chairman was on first-name terms with the man in the cheap suit, and no one had known there was a boy named Noah. Across the table, Claire Donovan saw Daniel clearly for the first time. He was lean. His shoulders were squared in the careful, contained way of a man who had learned long ago not to take up extra space. She watched his hands as he answered. There were old calluses along the joints of his middle fingers. Not the soft hands of a consultant, the hands of someone who had once worked. "He's well," Daniel said. "Thank you for asking." Eleanor Whitmore moved behind Claire's chair under the pretext of pouring more wine. She bent low and dropped a folded slip of paper into Claire's open palm beneath the table. Her voice, when it came, was barely a breath. "Look up Hale, D. in the Founders Registry, 1995. You alone, not Marcus." She walked away before Claire could turn her head. Claire closed her fingers around the paper. She felt her heart begin to move differently inside her chest. Marcus, who could feel power slipping from the room and could not name the cause, leaned forward across the table at Daniel. "Mr. Hale, what is it you actually do for a living? I'd love to hear." Daniel answered without raising his voice. "I consult on logistics for a few small companies across New England." The chairman spoke, quietly, with the finality of a closed door. "Daniel understands supply chains better than anyone in this room. I would suggest you listen to him, Marcus." Marcus laughed too brightly and turned the conversation toward the Northbridge deal. He spoke at length about synergies. He spoke about margin expansion. He spoke about what he called the difficult but necessary work of trimming workforce. Daniel ate little. He drank water. He did not interrupt anyone. Claire watched him the whole evening. He listened more carefully than anyone else at the table. When the chairman finally rose to leave, Daniel rose with him. They exchanged no words, only a brief look that lasted a half-second longer than it needed to. In the hallway by the coat check, Claire stopped Daniel as he was buttoning his coat. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry for the way Marcus spoke to you." Daniel offered her a small, tired smile. "I've been spoken to worse, Miss Donovan. Drive home safely." He walked out into the cold. In the back seat of her car, Claire unfolded Eleanor's slip of paper a second time. Under the dome light, she read the words again. Then she opened her tablet, signed into the firm's internal system, and typed the name into the search bar. "Hale Daniel." The screen blinked once. A red banner appeared. "Access restricted. Tier 1 clearance required." She stared at it for a long time. Her driver did not start the car. She did not ask him to. Daniel had come home at 11 that night. The porch light was on. The house was quiet. Noah was on the couch in his pajamas, wrapped in the blanket Sarah had knitted the year before her diagnosis. The television was muted. The boy had been waiting. Daniel knelt beside him, lifted him carefully, and carried him up the stairs to bed. He tucked the blanket around the boy's shoulders. He kissed his forehead. He stood in the doorway a long moment before he turned off the hall light. In the morning, the boy sat with his bowl of cereal and asked the question Daniel had been waiting for. "Were people kind to you last night, Dad?" Daniel set down his coffee. He answered honestly, because he had promised a long time ago never to lie to his son. "Most of them were. One of them wasn't. But it's all right." Noah considered this seriously, the way he considered most things. "Mom used to say, if they aren't kind, we're still kind. Because we want to be." "Yes," Daniel said. She did. At the Whitmore Capitol Tower in downtown Boston, Claire Donovan had not slept. She arrived at her office before 6. She dialed Eleanor's private line. The older woman picked up on the second ring. "I cannot explain anything further over a telephone, Miss Donovan. Come to my office Friday at 7 in the evening. If you still have questions then, I will answer what I can." The line went dead before Claire could speak. The executive committee meeting began at 10. Marcus stood at the front of the room beside a large screen showing the Northbridge acquisition deck. He spoke confidently. He proposed an 80% purchase, the immediate dismissal of 40% of the workforce, the sale of 2 warehouses and the Northern Fleet. The room applauded politely. Claire raised her hand. "Marcus, your projected EBITDA assumes the elimination of the northern routes. Those routes have been Northbridge's most profitable corridor 3 years running. The numbers don't support what you're proposing." Marcus's smile thinned. "Claire, let's not let emotion creep into the financials." She did not look away from him. "It isn't emotion. It's the company's own internal data." At the back of the room, in a chair near the wall, Daniel Hale sat with his hands folded over a yellow legal pad. He had been brought in, at Claire's request, as an external consultant. He had not spoken once. Marcus turned on him. "Mr. Hale, do you have anything to add? Or are you only here because Harold felt sorry for you?" Daniel set down his pen. He took a slow breath. "I think Miss Donovan has asked the right question. I have nothing further." The meeting ended without a vote. Claire followed Daniel down the long corridor, into the elevator, and out into the underground parking garage. She caught up with him beside an old Ford F-150 parked between two black sedans. "This is your truck. 280,000 miles on it." Sarah picked it out. "My wife." In 2014, he said the name without performance, without flinching. He said it the way a man might say a prayer he had repeated every night for years. Claire did not ask him anything else. She nodded. He climbed into the truck, started the engine, and pulled away. She stood there in the cold concrete light. Her eyes followed the red taillights for 3 seconds longer than they needed to. Then she walked, slowly, back to the elevator. That afternoon, Marcus closed his office door, picked up his private phone, and began calling members of the board one by one. He spoke softly to each of them. He suggested bonuses. He suggested a 35% rise in share price within 18 months. He suggested that the old way of doing things, the chairman's way, was over. He worked the phones for 3 hours. By dinner, he had 8 of 12 votes promised. The next day, Daniel drove out to Worcester. The North Bridge yard was old. The steel siding rust-streaked. The asphalt cracked. He walked through the open bay door in his gray suit. The men inside looked up from their work. Most of them were over 50. Many had been there 20 years or more. The yard foreman, a heavy-set man in his 60s named Frank Delaney, lifted his head from a clipboard and started across the floor. He stopped 6 feet from Daniel. His face changed. "Danny." Then Frank caught himself. His eyes flicked to the office windows. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale." "Sorry, Mr. Hale. Didn't know you were coming." Daniel's expression did not change, but something passed between the two men, brief and complete. What neither of them saw was Claire Donovan's car, pulling into the gravel lot at the far end of the yard. She had come out to do her own independent valuation. She had watched the exchange through the windshield. She had heard Frank, through the open driver's window, say Danny. She caught Daniel in the parking lot 15 minutes later, after his walkthrough. "Frank called you Danny." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. It was a long time ago, before Sarah got sick. He did not say anything else. He climbed into his truck. He drove away. In Boston that same afternoon, Marcus Reeve was on the phone again, this time with his private attorney. "I want everything you can find on a man named Daniel Hale, Massachusetts, mid-40s. I want to know why Harold cares about him. I want something I can use." That night, Daniel cooked grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen counter. Noah set the table. After they ate, the boy went up to his room and came back down, carefully holding a folded sheet of construction paper. "I drew you something." Daniel opened it slowly. 2 figures stood on the deck of a small boat, a tall man and a small boy. The ocean around them was full of soft blue waves. "That's you. That's me. And Mom is in the waves. Because Mom is everywhere." Daniel looked at the drawing for a long time. He did not cry. He walked across the kitchen and pinned the picture to the refrigerator door with a red magnet. "Thank you, buddy." Across the river, in a quiet apartment in Back Bay, Claire Donovan sat in her kitchen with a bottle of red wine that she had opened but not poured. Her laptop was open on the counter. She typed 3 words into the search bar. "Daniel Hale, Northbridge, 2013. The first result was a small business article from a regional paper. The headline read, "Anonymous Buyer Saves Worcester Logistics Firm from Bankruptcy." She clicked. The article had been stripped almost bare. Only the headline remained. The body had been removed. No name, no photograph. The byline pointed to a journalist who, she would learn the next morning, had died of cancer in 2017. She stood at her window for a long time and looked at the Charles River. She had begun to understand that she had been standing, for some time now, in the middle of a story no one had ever told her. The next executive meeting was on Thursday. Marcus came into the room with his color up. He had prepared a new round of slides. He stood at the head of the table and, before he opened them, he looked down the length of the room at Daniel Hale. "I hear you're raising your boy alone, Mr. Hale. Impressive. You must really need this consulting work. Whitmore pays generously." The room went still. A senior partner shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The chief financial officer studied the table. Claire rose to her feet. Marcus, if you don't have new data on the acquisition, I move we adjourn. She did not look at Daniel as she spoke. She looked only at Marcus. Daniel saw it. He said nothing. The meeting ended in 7 minutes. In the lobby afterward, Claire stopped Daniel by the revolving door. Coffee, down the street. Now, he nodded. The cafe was small. They sat by the window. She did not ask him about the founder's registry. She did not ask him about Frank or Worcester. She asked him about Noah. He talked about his son slowly. He talked about Sarah. They had met at MIT. She had been an aerospace engineer. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the spring of 2019. She had lived 14 months. He spoke without self-pity. He spoke the way a man speaks of the weather of a country he no longer lives in. Claire said her own short version. Divorced 4 years ago. No children. Her work was what she had left to hold. They sat in a long silence. Both of them reached for the small white plate of croissants at the same moment. Their hands touched along the edge. Neither pulled back. They both looked down at the plate. Eleanor Whitmore came into the cafe then. She bought a tea. On her way out, she stopped at their table and gave a small inclination of her head to Daniel that was neither casual nor a curtsy. Mr. Hale, Eleanor. She moved on. Claire watched her go. The small bow was the kind of bow a senior staff member gives to someone of higher standing. Claire had seen it given to the chairman exactly once. That night, Daniel sat on the edge of Noah's bed. The nightlight glowed soft and blue against the wall. There's a good woman at the office. She stood up for me today. Noah looked up from his book. Does she know about Mom? Yes, I told her. Did she look sad? Daniel considered this carefully. No. She looked listening. The boy nodded the way the boy nodded about everything. That's the better one. The next morning, Claire found an email in her inbox. The subject line was empty. The body was 3 lines. Friday, 7 in the evening. The chairman's office. Come alone. She closed the email. She opened the internal donor records system on her workstation, the place where institutional charitable contributions were logged. She searched for any record connected to the name she had been turning over in her mind. One file came up. An anonymous gift to Boston Children's Hospital, dated August 2014, $2,300,000. The donor was listed as undisclosed. The internal countersigning field, the one only auditors normally saw, read in small letters. Hala, day, Friday at 7. The 41st floor of the Whitmore Capitol Tower was dark, except for the corner office of the chairman and the office of his chief of staff. Eleanor Whitmore unlocked her door for Claire and locked it again behind her. She walked to the steel safe behind her desk. The safe was old. Its dial was worn. She turned it from memory. She brought out a leather folio the color of an old saddle. The wax seal across the flap was unbroken. She broke it. Inside were 3 documents. The first was the founding agreement of Whitmore Capital Holdings, dated April 14, 1995. There were 3 signatures at the bottom of the last page. Harold Whitmore, Eleanor Whitmore, who Claire had not known was Harold's cousin and a founding partner, and in clean even ink, Daniel J. Hale. Daniel was the silent founding partner of the holding company. The holding company that owned the operating company that Marcus Reeve ran. Daniel held 49% of the voting equity of the parent, vested through a trust. The second document was the deed of transfer, dated May of 2019, moving Daniel's entire holding into a blind trust named, simply, JS 1995 Holdings. Claire understood the initials at once. Joseph, Sarah, the middle names of their parents. The third document was a single page, in Daniel's handwriting, dated the same day. It read, in part, I withdraw from active participation in all firm affairs to care for my wife and son. I do not surrender ownership. I will not exercise voting rights except in extraordinary circumstances. Signed, Daniel J. Hale. Claire sat down. She had not been aware that she had sat down. Her legs had decided for her. Why are you showing me this? Eleanor's voice was steady. Because Marcus is taking the Northbridge acquisition to a full board vote on Monday morning. Daniel will not defend himself. He has never defended himself. He saved Northbridge in 2013, anonymously, with his own capital, after the bank tried to take it. He kept Frank Delaney's family in their house. He kept every one of those men employed. He has spent every year since making certain no one knew. If Marcus is allowed to take that company apart and lay those men off, Daniel will break, quietly, and he will still say nothing. Because he promised his wife before she died that he would not fight under his own name again. Claire could not yet speak. Eleanor slid a notarized copy of the founding agreement across the desk. You have Tier 1 clearance. You may call an extraordinary session of the board under Article 7.3. I cannot. I am only the chairman's chief of staff. You have the authority. Claire took the document with both hands. She left the building in a light, cold rain. In the back of her car, she dialed Daniel's number. She did not mention Eleanor. She did not mention the safe. Are you free Sunday evening? I'd like to talk. It's important. There was a brief pause on his end. Yes. Thank you. He set down the phone in his kitchen. He stood in the dark for a long time, looking up at the closed door of his son's bedroom, where the boy was already asleep. He understood that everything was about to change. Sunday evening was clear and cold. Claire arrived at the small Newton house at 6. She had not brought a briefcase. She had brought a brown paper bag with a bottle of olive oil and a loaf of bread from the bakery on Newbury Street. Noah opened the door. He extended his small hand. My dad says you're the kind person from his office. Claire knelt down to be eye level with him. Your dad is the kindest person I have ever met. The boy considered this gravely, and then he led her by the hand into the kitchen. Daniel was at the stove in a clean white apron, stirring a pot of pasta. He looked up as she entered. He held her eyes for one moment longer than was casual. Then he smiled and turned the heat down. They ate at the small round table. Noah told Claire about Wales. He told her about a teacher he liked and a teacher he did not. After dinner, the boy hugged his father, then turned and made a small, careful bow to Claire before he climbed the stairs to bed. Daniel and Claire took their tea out to the back porch. The October air was sharp. The porch light was old and yellow. Somewhere in the dark yard, a dog was barking faintly. She placed the leather folio on the small wicker table between them. He looked at it. He did not open it. He already knew. Why did you never tell anyone? He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. Because when Sarah got sick, I understood that everything I had built, the capital, the companies, the leverage, none of it could save her. I promised her I would not go back to that life, that I would only be Noah's father. Marcus is going to take Northbridge apart on Monday. 40 men. Frank, you promised Sarah you wouldn't go back. Did you promise her you wouldn't protect what you had already saved? He looked out into the dark garden. The silence between them stretched a long time. When he finally spoke, he did not look at her. Sarah told me once, if our silence is hurting someone else, it isn't humility anymore. It's fear. He turned to her. I'll come to the meeting on Monday. But I need you to help me, not because I'm a founding partner, because I don't remember anymore how to walk into a room like that. I have forgotten how to be that man. I'll be there. She set her hand on the back of his hand, where it rested on the arm of the chair. She did not grasp it. She only let her fingers cover his. He did not move his hand. Neither of them spoke for nearly 5 minutes. The wind moved the dry leaves in the yard. In a glass office tower across the city, at that same hour, Marcus Reeve was at his desk drafting a press release dated for Monday morning. He had the language already worked out. Decisive restructuring, workforce realignment, long-term value. He called his uncle at the Reeve family office in Manhattan. Monday we close it. Whitmore's old. He won't come down for this. Hale is an echo, nothing else. By Tuesday morning we own the trucking company outright. In a private study in Brookline, Eleanor Whitmore picked up a secure landline. The chairman answered on the first ring. Daniel has agreed to come. Claire is filing the notice in the morning. Good, the old man said. I'll be there. This time I won't need to save an empty chair. Claire left the Newton house at midnight. Daniel walked her to her car. He stood at the curb in the cold until her taillights had disappeared around the corner. Then he stood there a little longer. Monday morning. The boardroom at Whitmore Capital was on the 42nd floor. 12 chairs around a long walnut table. The windows looked out over the harbor. Marcus took the head of the table at 8:50. He wore a charcoal Brioni suit and a deep red tie. He shook hands. He laughed easily. He had the calm of a man who had already counted his votes. At 8:55, Claire Donovan entered the room. She walked directly to the table, set down a single sheet of paper in front of the corporate secretary, and stepped back. Notice of extraordinary session. Invoked under Article 7.3 of the Founders' Charter, 1995. Marcus read it. The color went out of his face. Article 7.3 has never been used. Eleanor Whitmore, who had appeared quietly in the corner of the room in her capacity as corporate secretary, answered him. Not until today. The door opened. Chairman Harold Whitmore stepped in, walking slowly with his cane. The board rose to their feet. The chairman did not take his usual seat at the head of the table. He stood at the side of the room. He waited. The door opened again. Daniel Hale walked in. He wore the same gray suit, the same worn shoes. He crossed the room without hurrying and placed one hand on the back of the chairman's chair, but he did not sit down. He stood behind it. He looked at every face at the table, one at a time, the way the chairman had looked at every face at the Somerset Club. He spoke evenly. He did not raise his voice. My full name is Daniel James Hale. I am a silent founding partner of Whitmore Capital Holdings. I hold 49% of the voting equity of the parent company through the trust known as JS 1995 Holdings. I have not used this voice in 7 years. I am using it today. Once, and only once. Marcus shot to his feet. This is a joke. Show me proof. Claire placed the founders' agreement on the table. Eleanor stepped forward. I have been corporate secretary of the Founders Trust since April of 1995. This document is authentic. It has been filed with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. The trust is in good standing. Daniel continued. The acquisition of Northbridge Logistics will not proceed under the terms presented. I am not asking for the deal to be cancelled. I am proposing a restructuring. The parent company will acquire 51% of Northbridge. Every employee will be retained. The existing management will continue to operate the company. Those are the only terms I will support. They are the only conditions I have asked of this firm in 7 years. The vote was called. With Daniel's 49% of the parent, the chairman's holdings, and 3 independent directors who had read the documents on the table in front of them and chosen, in that moment, to think for themselves, the count came back 9-3. Marcus was on his feet, his face dark. This is a coup. I'll sue. Chairman Harold Whitmore spoke for the first time. His voice was dry as paper. Marcus, last week at the Somerset Club, you humiliated a man in front of 30 investors. That man is the reason your father has held the Reeve seat on this board since 2001. I have sat and watched you dig your own grave. The work is finished now. Eleanor placed a second document on the table. A prepared letter of resignation. The signature line was blank. Marcus looked down at it for a long time. He picked up the pen. Marcus signed. He stood. He walked the length of the boardroom without looking at any face. In the corridor, his former assistant was already at her desk. She kept her eyes on her screen. The board turned back to Daniel. You'll take the CEO seat. Daniel shook his head once. No, I left that life. I am not coming back to operate. A silence around the table. Some of the older directors exchanged glances. They had not been certain, until that moment, that he meant it. Now they were certain. He turned to Claire. I am proposing Claire Donovan as interim chief executive officer of the operating company, with the full backing of the chairman and the Founders Trust. The chairman nodded at once. I support the motion. The board passed it in under 5 minutes. Claire stood very still. After the meeting, she caught Daniel at the elevator bank. Why me? He looked at her with a quiet steadiness. Because you were the only person in that room who asked the right question when no one else would. And because you stood beside me when you didn't have to. The doors opened. He gestured for her to step in first. The next morning he drove out to Worcester in the old truck. Frank Delaney met him at the bay door. The men of Northbridge had gathered on the yard floor. They stood in a loose half-circle in their work coats, holding their coffee, the steam rising into the cold air. Word had reached them by 6. Frank crossed the gap and put both arms around Daniel. He did not say anything. A few of the men were openly wiping their eyes. One old loader, Pete Halloran, who had been at the company 41 years, just stood with his hat in his hands. Daniel cleared his throat. There's still work to be done. Same as always. The men nodded. They went back to it. The forklift started up again, one by one, the way they did every morning. The way they had done every morning that Daniel had quietly paid for 13 years. At home that night, Noah was waiting at the bottom of the stairs in his pajamas. Dad, Are you going to have to go away? Daniel crouched down so they were eye to eye. No, buddy. I'm here. For good. Noah let out a breath that he had been holding for days. He pressed his small face into his father's shoulder. Late that afternoon, in the office on the 41st floor, Eleanor Whitmore stood at the window beside the chairman. They watched the harbor lights coming on. Sarah would be proud. The old man was quiet for a moment. Sarah always knew Daniel would have to do this one day. She told me, before she died, when he comes back, make sure he doesn't come back alone. Eleanor turned her face away from the window for a moment. Downishin. In the operating company's executive suite, Claire Donovan sat at the CEO's desk for the first time. A small package was delivered to her by a courier. There was no return label. Inside was a folded white linen napkin from the Somerset Club. Beneath the napkin was a small handwritten note. Thank you for asking the right question. D. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside her right hand. She smiled, alone in her new office, for the first time in a long time. 6 weeks later, at the end of October, Boston Common was knee-deep in yellow leaves. Northbridge was running steadily. Every one of the 40 men was still on the payroll. Marcus Reeve had taken a position at a competing firm in New York. No one at Whitmore Capital said his name. It was a Sunday morning in Newton, just past 10. The trees along Daniel's street were all the colors of a slow fire. Noah was at the kitchen table working on a new drawing. The doorbell rang. Claire stood on the front porch in jeans and a thick cream sweater. She was holding a small white bakery box from a shop in Beacon Hill that she knew Noah liked. The boy ran to the door and threw it open. Dad, Miss Claire is here. Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway in his apron, his hands still dusted with flour. He stopped for a single beat, not from surprise, from something else that warmed in his chest and that he did not yet have a name for. Come in. Out of the cold, the three of them sat at the small kitchen table and ate scones. Noah unfolded his new drawing for Claire. There were 3 figures under a blue sky: a tall man, a small boy, and, beside them, a woman with brown hair. Daniel looked at the drawing. He did not say anything. Claire looked at the drawing. She did not say anything either. After breakfast, Noah asked if he could go out to the front yard. The neighbor boy had a new slingshot. Daniel said yes. The screen door slammed behind him. Daniel and Claire took their tea out to the wooden porch at the back of the house. The morning was bright and sharp. A few late maple leaves drifted down onto the railing. They sat side by side in 2 old rocking chairs. I didn't come here to talk about the company, Claire said. I know. A long quiet between them. I'm not good at this. I didn't think I'd be sitting on a porch on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock with someone I didn't need to talk to. Daniel turned his cup slowly in his hands. Sarah used to say, the most important things, we always meet when we're not looking for them. He paused. I wasn't looking for you, Claire, she answered softly. And I wasn't looking for you. She rested her hand on the arm of her chair. He rested his hand on the arm of his. Their fingers were not touching. They were only near. Neither of them moved. They looked out together at the yard, at the slow falling of the maple leaves, at the bright, cold October light. After a while, the screen door banged open, and Noah came running through the kitchen and out onto the back porch with a slingshot in his hand. Miss Claire, come watch. I can hit the can off the fence post now. Claire laughed. She rose from her chair and let the boy take her hand and pull her down the porch steps into the yard. Daniel stood at the porch railing and watched them go, the boy and the woman, walking together across the grass under the bright October sun. A single maple leaf drifted down and rested on his shoulder. He did not brush it away. Neither of them had been looking. That was, perhaps, why they had finally found each other. On a porch in Newton, on an ordinary Sunday, with a boy laughing in the leaves between them.